Hello everyone. Welcome to Ka Homeopathy Study Group Pro Bono webinar. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. So nice to see many of you from different countries and different time zones. Before we start, we would thank Universe for giving us this great opportunity. And our Chief Administrator, Dr. Sweta Singh, will start the session.
Dr. Kavita, and it's my privilege to explain about Ka Homeopathy Study Group to all of you. Ka Homeopathy Study Group Pro Bono was organized and founded by homeopath and humanitarian Kavita Kukunur, President and CEO of Kavita Holistic Approach. This study group is intended to be an offering from Kavita to the homeopaths around the globe, sharing goodwill and solid clinical work within the classical model. Our principles, foundational principle for the Ka mission and vision are very unique to inspire young homeopaths, mentor, provide excellency for educational purposes using holistic approaches via webinars, which are based on principles of classical homeopathy and provide professional continuing educational homeopathy credits for practitioners. We provide merit certificates for spreading the. Dr. Kavita is a member of Kavin Friendly Foundation, a non-profit organization that helps to serve poor people in greater needs in India. She is the recipient of Martha Ullman Community Service Award by National Center for Homeopathy and Best Entrepreneur Award from Dr. N. Lingaraju, Principal of JSPS Homeopathic Medical College, Hyderabad, India. We are extremely happy and proud that we celebrated 10 years of her book, Beyond the Limits, A Challenge to Prove Oneself. This precious writing contains her true life experiences where she connected to homeopathic principle with inspirational stories, where she converted her obstacles and struggles as stepping stones for her success in America, and her passion and devotion towards life and homeopathic profession dedicated to all proud woman. She is maintaining equilibrium in her personal and professional life. So happy to announce that she has completed her 25 years of marriage in this September and became an inspiration to all of us. All of now, we have over 180 recordings on professional webinars related to homeopathy, health related topics, and inspirational talks available on our channel, Kavita Kukunur. This webinar is moderated by myself, Dr. Shweta Singh, Ka Chief Administrator, and it is being recorded as we speak, and we are live on Facebook. We will take questions at the end of the webinar. We will post jot form in Zoom webinar chat at the end of the webinar. Please fill the form to receive certificate. And if you're watching live webinar, email us at kastudygroup@gmail.com. We have with us our Ka volunteer, Dr. Srija Yeravali, and she will be explaining about Ka Code of Ethics. So Dr. Srija, over to you.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Srija. I'm a Ka volunteer, very glad to be the part of the Ka study group and would like to take privilege to read our Code of Ethics. To be a Ka speaker needs at least 1 to 2 months active volunteering. Only Ka speaker themes are promoted in newsletters and webinars. Ka provides volunteering for 2 to 12 months, respects and inspires volunteers to grow. Active volunteers will be promoted through our website, social media, and added to WhatsApp groups. Articles of volunteers will be posted on Ka website, and newsletters will be sent for the publication at other journals too. Volunteers and speakers are eligible for prestigious Ka annual awards. Volunteers are eligible for Ka inspirational talks. Volunteers are eligible for case discussions. Ka promotes homeopathic organizations as well as their mega events. Ka promotes great work of speakers through book reviews. Honorable guests may propose their future courses or events after the webinar. Ka maintains a healthy and happy environment, so keeps only like-minded folks. So if you have any doubts or else any concerns, so please feel free to text like email us at kastudygroup@gmail.com. Like you can find the Ka study group updates on social media too, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you. Over to you, Kavita ma'am.
So much, Dr. Srija. Srija is our active and enthusiastic car volunteer. And thank you so much, Dr. Sweta Singh, our car chief administrator who manages car activities with cute smile. And I thank Car Homeopathy Study Group entire team for the continuous selfless support with which we are able to make our pro bono activities and webinars so beautiful. These webinars are for educational purposes only and see an expert homeopath for treatment. Being an outreach coordinator of CHC PR committee, HNA CPD provider, encourages homeopaths to become CHS certified and to participate in HNA accredited CU webinars. For practitioners in North America, now it is time for recertification of CHC and NASH. So be a part of our live free study group webinars to earn continuing educational credits and participant CU certificate. Today is September 19, 2021, and we have two honorable speakers, Dr. Vandana Chopra and Dr. Pankaj Agarwal, with very interesting topic, research-driven, quantitative and qualitative approach to study homeopathic literature. We planned this session for 1 hour, 15 minutes, and we are open for questions too. Research in homeopathy is very important, especially with a double-blind case analysis and more. Today, we will learn more about all that from our speakers. Let me take privilege to introduce our two honorable speakers for today's webinar. Our first speaker, Dr. Vandana Chopra. She is an experienced homeopathic doctor from India. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology, Keshav Mahavidyalaya, University of Delhi, and the Ethics and Standard Committee Chair of APCDA. Is an alumnus of Nehru Homeopathic Medical College and Hospital, a gold medalist of the University of Delhi. She started her professional career as a homeopathic physician and later excelled and received her doctorate in the discipline of psychology, known as a research methodology expert and quantitative data analyst. Dr. Vandana is a faculty to PhD scholars at Mano Rachna University. She has guided many MBBS, BHMS, BAMS, BDS, MD, PhD research aspirants in their thesis work, having many national and international publications to her repute. She is the recipient of the Young Scholars Award twice in a row and at Tokyo and Tapi, and the Outstanding Career Practitioner Award in May 2020. She is also an international certified career counselor and a recognized trainer of training needs analysis by ICTM, DOPT GOI. In her spare time, she likes to read books on spirituality and exploring dimensions of human mind. And our second speaker, Dr. Pankaj Agarwal, is a very reputed homeopathic physician with a creditable practice of over 33 years. He's also been a great professor of homeopathy, as well as a researcher breaking new ground in several areas in homeopathy. His DHMS and diploma in NIH, MA in psychology from Annamalai Nagar, and MD in homeopathy, PhD scholar from MUHS. Worked with physicians of international fame and village homeopathic practice at Chagunagar. He has organized various homeopathic free checkup camps in different branches of India. Let us welcome our two honorable speakers to our webinar, and we will start with Dr. Vandana Chopra first.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kavita, for that warm incitation. I'm really pleased. Thank you, Dr. Shweta, Dr. Srija, for making us aware about KHA study group, its ethics, and its lot of work. And of course, the credits that Dr. Kavita has to its honor. I'm really glad to know that today, Dr. Kavita, and many congratulations to you. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and warm greetings to from wherever you are joining us live on Facebook and various other platforms. They have told you about my work in homeopathy. My connection with homeopathy has been since 1992. And today I'm doing homeopathy as well as I have done PhD in psychology. Let me share my screen to start today's topic. I hope you're all able to see my screen. Dr. Shweta, you can just confirm me.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So today we have a topic of research-driven quantitative and qualitative approach to study homeopathic literature. This topic is very, very close to me. I had a practice of 13 years in homeopathy, and then later I shifted to psychology, had a very extensive research and career in the field of psychology, and then my comeback to homeopathy again with the field of research. So I entered back in homeopathy with research qualifications, and everywhere I'm talking about the usefulness of taking research driven approach to study homeopathy, to do our practice of homeopathy with a research driven angle, which is the need of the hour. Like Dr. Kavita rightly said, that we go for randomized trials, we go for various kinds of experimental designs in other fields of medicine. And now is the time that we have a great scope of all these kinds of experimental designs in homeopathy as well. So we all must practice and we all must publish our papers and do the study and practice of homeopathy with a research driven angle. And that is what I'm going to speak about today with my co-speaker, Dr. Pankaj Agarwal, whom I give all credit of me to coming back to homeopathy. I have an association with Dr. Pankaj Agarwal for a very, very long time, since the time I was a student of homeopathy. And today I'm very honored to share the platform with him. This is about me that Dr. Kavita has already told you. All right, so I'll start with this, that everything that we do in our practice or per se in medical science, what does it deal with? If we talk about research, if we talk about diagnosis, if we talk about treatment or prevention, which is our forte as a homeopathic physician, everything that we do is based on evidence, facts, or measurement. Now, why do I say so? How do we come to know that my BP is high, or my cholesterol level is going high, or I am anemic, or my urea is high? How do I come to know about all these things? If you very closely examine these points, you will come to know that everything in medical science that we try to analyze, try to diagnose, try to see is through the lens of measurement. We go for tests, we go for blood test, urine test, various kinds of tests, we go for chest x-ray. Everything that is mentioned in all these diagnostic criteria are based on measurements. We come up with certain figures, with certain numbers, with which we are able to tell ourselves whether we are physiologically healthy or we are moving towards some pathological disease. So if I have a BP of 120, 80, 130, 90, which is appropriate for my age, I can be safe. But if it is above that, I call myself hypertensive. If my hemoglobin is left, I call myself anemic. So we are diagnosing, we are trying to understand disorders only through numbers, right? So in medical science, there is a great deal of importance of numbers, evidence. Everything which is physiological, that is within the normal limits, or pathological, we believe in scientific evidence and measurement. And that is what we have to bring in the practice of homeopathy and research of homeopathy as well, which I'm advocating in my today's presentation. So there is a lot of buzzword about scientific evidence or evidence-based practice, EBP. Everything in medical world these days is through EBP. That is when the researchers' findings are a result of well-designed studies with methodological rigor that minimize the chances bias, a type of error that systematically affects the reliability and validity of research result, right? Evidence, how can we make an evidence and how can we be sure that my practice, that my case analysis, my research is going in the direction where I'm wanting? How can we analyze it? So how we have to go about it? First, we have to design our studies. See, what is research? Research is a systematic inquiry where we have very well-designed research methodology, right? It should have a methodological rigor. Whatever method I am following to take my case, to diagnose, to cure a patient, to prevent a disease, it should have a proper systematic method. And that method should be free of error. I should be sure what I am doing. It should be systematically done. Then two very important points of scientific evidence. It should be reliable and valid. I'm going to talk about it in little more detail. Reliable means it should be consistent, and validity means it should be doing what it is intending to do, right? And the results should be scientifically evidence-backed. This is what evidence-based practice is all about in all the medical field of science, and this is what is applicable to homeopathic field of science as well, when we say that we have to do our research or clinical practice through evidence-based findings. Okay, so how can we ensure that there is a scientific evidence, right? There are two ways to ensure it, or I would say there are two subjects that every MD homeopathic research scholar or a PhD research scholar studies. First is research methodology and second is biostatistics. So if we have knowledge of these two subjects thoroughly, then we can be very sure that whatever we are doing in our practice or in our research or in our academic study or while studying the classical homeopathic literature, we are doing it with scientific evidence. So I'll talk about these two broad disciplines which make any inquiry a scientific inquiry. That is, it should be backed with research methodology and with biostatistics. So mission is that there should be a harmonization of knowledge in education, practice, and research. Whether you are a homeopathic student, whether you are established homeopathy practitioner, or whether you are a research scholar or an MD student, whatever you are doing, everything should be harmonized, and then would be the sound knowledge of homeopathic literature, or what we call as what we establish it in our books, articles, and journals. Okay, so what is research methodology and how can we ensure? So research methodology is following a systematic inquiry or steps that we have to go one after the other. And this establishes a body of knowledge which is evidence-based practice, which I just spoke about, right? So what inculcates research methodology, or what all are included in it? First of all is your research design. I'm just going to talk about it in little more detail. Then you have to focus on what sample you're going to choose, sampling method. What are your inclusion, exclusion criteria? What are your tools for data collection? What intervention are you going to apply to your patient? And what will be the pre-post effect of that intervention? And what will be your data analysis method, which is called as biostatistics, right? So how do we go when we have to integrate our studies, our practice, and our research discipline with a scientific rigor? How do we do about it? We start from here. We identify a problem in homeopathic findings, in homeopathic literature, in homeopathic practice, whatever you feel is the main cause with which you want to do a research-based evidence study. So you try to identify that problem. You convert that problem into well-defined objectives, what you want to prove at the end of that study. Then you apply your research strategy, how you are going to do it. See, we all simply go to clinic, we sit, we have studied homeopathy for good 6-8 years. We have an experience of more than 20-30 years. We sit in our clinics, we open our repertories, materia medicas, and we prescribe. That is how we are taught to practice homeopathy. That is how our experience tells us how to practice homeopathy. My purpose is how can you integrate research with the practice? So you have to think about research strategy. If even you are prescribing in a same manner to a patient, the way you are prescribing right now, can you apply research strategy to that? Yes, you can, because there are many types of research designs, and after thorough knowledge of those research design, which just requires a span of 15 days to 3 months, depending how rigorously you are studying them. If you have just a thorough knowledge of all this research strategy and research design in your clinical practice, you can apply them and you can establish an evidence-based study in research publications. And that is what homeopathy needs today, that every practitioner should integrate research with the practice so that whatever the findings are, whatever the results are, they can be published in the scientific domain and get due accreditation that it deserves, right? And then once you have designed research, which I'm just going to talk about, what is strategy and design, how many types of designs are there. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Then you go for literature review, what Hahnemann has said, what Bonninghausen has said, what Kent has said, what contemporary researchers have found about that particular topic or study that you are also studying in your research work. Then you gather scientific data, you interpret the data, you took out findings, and if the findings are giving concrete solution, well and good. If not, then what new problem it has emerged. We always say that research is a continuous cycle. Every solution gives rise to some new problem, and this is keep on repeating. So I always say a good practitioner is a good researcher. That we all are, but we don't know, to be very honest. We all are doing it. When our case, we have prescribed a Similimum with the great thorough study, and the patient comes back. We were very sure that the patient will come back with the positive response, but the patient is showing deviation from some positive happening or outcome that we are expecting. Then we again go back to the literature and study where I have gone wrong. This is what research is. Only we have to give this practice an angle of research strategy and research design. We are already doing it. We go back to literature, we study it, but we do not know the exact terminology that is being used in research in the present times. If we apply that, the same practice, the same theory that we study in our academic institutes can be converted into a research-based knowledge, right? Now, this is extensively what I have prepared, consulting books of homeopathic research methodology. And over here, you can see the glimpse of various kinds of research designs that we all can learn. Believe me, this looks very complicated, but this is not. I can teach you all these research designs in just a span of 2 to 3 hours, and you will be very thorough with it. Only that initiative to study a little bit about research methodology and biostatistics is what is required. So how many types of research designs are there? Primary and secondary. In secondary, we do not collect first-hand data. We take already collected data from some other sources, the earlier researchers, the book, what Hahnemann has written, what Kent has written, or they have already written a lot of literature. So if I'm taking their literature and I'm taking their data to interpret in the contemporary times, then it is secondary research, because that data is not collected by me. That data is collected by those founders. So this is secondary research. Secondary research. In primary research, you collect data yourself by seeing patients, by seeing clients. So that means all practice that you are doing is kind of a primary research, because you are collecting first-hand data on a daily basis when you're sitting in your clinic. This can be experimental, which has to be done in proper settings, hospital settings, where you need non-randomized experiments and RCTs, which are very, very popular these days. They are not tough. They can be learned in just 1.5 to 2 hours. What is an experimental randomized controlled design of research that I can conduct? And clinical trials, we know about it. Under observational is something that you're doing in your clinic almost on a daily basis. This can be descriptive, analytical. Under descriptive, you have person level studies, like you take single individual case. So there is a case report, you see a patient in a series, or you see multiple cases of a single disease. That's case series report. Then you have cross-sectional studies and surveillance. Under aggregate level studies, you take collective patients and then you study about them, like we were studying during this pandemic. Under analytical, you have cross-sectional, case control, and cohort designs. So these are various kinds of designs. Especially I'm talking about descriptive and analytical primary research designs that you can apply in your clinical practice and convert your clinical prescribing or clinical case taking into a research-based scientific inquiry. So this all can be learned and your cases can be converted into research articles. We should publish more. I always focus a lot on publishing the literature because we are banking on literature. What all homeopathy we know has been written by the great stalwarts and we are still following them today. We also need to leave some research for the forthcoming generations to follow and they should remember us. And this is what I focus on a lot in the field of homeopathy as well as in the field of psychology. We are doing a lot of research in our clinics We just need to integrate the knowledge of research methodology and biostatistics with it and publish it more so that many forthcoming doctors, future doctors, forthcoming students can be benefited out of that, right? And of course, if you are a MD student or a PhD scholar, all these things are must for you. I think now even at undergraduate level, now they are proposing it that students should undergo one basic research study even in their undergraduate coursework. This is required, right? So I give you a couple of examples, like this I've taken from journals only, and the link is given here. Kavita ma'am or anybody can share the link with all of you. This is the name of the study and how the same study can be converted into research language. So this was an open label observational pilot study. So if I go back to previous slide, this is my observational study. Can you see it here? So simply clinical study has been converted to an observational study, right? Open label means as a physician, what I'm giving the medicine, my dispenser who is dispensing the medicine and patient who is getting the medicine, all of them know what medicine it is. Blind controls are when patients do not know what medicines are given to them. This is usually done in RCT where half of the patients are given placebo and other half are given medicine to see the comparison. Okay, pilot study, and this is done to evaluate the usefulness of homeopathic as adjuvant to conventional care in treating patients affected with cerebral stroke. Now, this is the study design. Simply, you're seeing a case in your clinic, and the clinical case has been converted to a study design by adding these fancy words. And these fancy words are the same which I showed you in the previous slide. Okay. Now, how they have done it, this is what we don't know, but we don't do when we sit in our clinics. We don't apply any tool, or any tool that we apply are the only diagnostic blood investigations, X-rays, MRIs, or CT scans, that whether there has been a change in the condition or not. Of course, those are also tools. I'm not denying it, but you can use some specific research tools to evaluate pre-post comparisons. What was the condition before medicine and what was the condition after the giving the medicine? So they have taken this National Institute of Health stroke scale, NIHSS stroke scale as a baseline. They saw all the vitals of the patient when they first came to them, and subsequently at the completion of 6 months after giving homeopathic treatment, that what is the difference. Now, this is something which we have to include in our clinical practice. This we don't do. So we definitely can make use of a lot of standardized scales for every disease that are available freely on most of the web resources. So if you will just type on the Google, you will be able to find them. And most of the researchers and academic community is very generous to share these scales at open platform. In research articles, you can very easily find them. Okay. And if you find that they have kept it under their copyright, you can always write an email to them. I tell you my case that I have been doing research from last 10, 11 years, and to whomsoever I have written, they are always very generous to provide their scales and tools to me, considering that I am also a researcher or an academician or a practitioner. And I'm going to use it for the benefit of research community as well as for my patient. Now, this is a tool that they have used. It is a 24 points tool, which has 11 items, and it tests these attributes of cerebral stroke: level of consciousness, gaze, visual fields, facial palsy, motor arm, motor leg, ataxia, sensory, language, dysarthria, extinction. This is what all characterizes cerebral stroke, and they have converted the symptoms into a standardized tool, right? Now, they have applied the tool. When patient came to them for the first time, baseline, what was the condition of patient and all these parameters. Then they gave homeopathic treatment, and then they again applied the tool after 6 months. Maybe they have applied in between also to see the change, and then they have recorded the change. And this is what is biostatistic. They compared pre-post and they found that it was significant. That means homeopathic medicines were adjuvant in the treatment of cerebral stroke. Now, I'm sure most of you must have cured many cases of stroke or at least treated them to a great extent. But your work will not come into existence unless and until you will convert it into this research language. And this is not tough, as you can see. This is simple what you do in your on a daily basis, right? I'll give you one more example. This is about effectiveness of homeopathic therapeutics in the management of childhood autism disorder. And these are the researchers who have done this study. Again, they have done a pre-post intervention study. They have taken 60 children. Now this is a case series because they have taken multiple cases. The previous example was case study. Only single case was done. This is a case series, multiple cases of the same disorder. So if you think that you specialize in a particular disorder or you specialize in a particular field of medicine or any specific homeopathic MD or PhD degree that you have obtained, please do studies on them and publish them. Those will be of great help for all the academic as well as practitioner community. This is a non-randomized. Non-randomized means that there were two groups, control and experimental. To control group, they were giving placebo. To experimental group, they were giving medicines. Non-randomized, they non-randomly divided people into two groups, right? 60, 30 will be divided into one group, 30 to the other group. Self-controlled, they were all told to follow certain restrictions or certain standard parameters. We also do this while we do drug proving in homeopathy. We give patients some standard protocols to follow, right? And pre and post intervention. What was their condition before the starting of medicine and what was the condition after medicines were given, and what was the condition in control group and what was the condition in experimental group. And again, you can see that a couple of statistical language that you can learn 2 months only. Biostatistics need only 2 months to study. And then they showed that it's a statistical significant change come. And tool that they used was autism hyperactivity scale. You can see there is a scale for every disorder. There is a scale for every related study that you are doing. And I will be very glad if some of you will come forward and develop some tools based on homeopathic literature. I will be very keen to join those studies, but you have to do hard work. And we can develop tools for homeopathic medicines. We can develop tool for homeopathic literature, given homeopathic literature, and those tools can be made standardized, used by everybody. And our case taking can go really simple with those tools, right? So this is how you convert simple knowledge into research knowledge, a standard knowledge, which can be used by masses and which can actually ease the work, right? All right. Now, biostatistics, coming to that, just a second. All right. Why biostatistics? Now, first thing I've spoken about is research methodology. We need to have knowledge of research designs, research methods, research tools in order to do a scientific inquiry. Now, once we have collected data, we have to convert it into statistics. See, everything is given to us in the form of statistics. We have daily statistics of how many vaccines are being administered in a day. We have daily statistics of how many cases in a day, how many deaths in a day. Everything in the pandemic was all about statistics. Today, facts can only be established on the basis of statistics. That is the reason that this new era is called the data era, right? So what is the new gold? Oil is the new gold. Oil was the new gold in the last century, and data is the new oil in this century, 21st century. Because unless and until you have an evidence-based data for what you are doing, your knowledge will not be called as scientific or evidence-based knowledge. So we need to apply statistics to convert simple language into data form so that there is a fact on basis of which we are speaking. And when we talk about statistics or data, it's a field of mathematics. We all have studied mathematics till 10th or 12th. And we know that mathematics deals with accuracy and precision. So when we apply biostatistics to research methodology, what we establish is accuracy and precision to our work, right? Medicine is an empirical science, and we have to focus a lot on accuracy and precision. We all were talking about vaccine last year in November, December, and this year in January. Okay, AstraZeneca has this much percentage of accuracy, Covaxin has this much, Pfizer has this much. What this accuracy and precision was telling us, whether it is safe to administer that vaccine or not, and how can it be gathered? Only through biostatistics. So in medical science, the knowledge of biostatistics along with research methodology is very important to increase accuracy and to increase precision, these two things. This is very interesting. What is accuracy and precision? If we would have been meeting in the live room, of course, I would have asked you, but since we are meeting in the virtual world, let's define. The first figure is good precision, but poor accuracy. This is poor precision, but good accuracy. This is good precision and good accuracy, and this is what we want in medical science. I always say to all my scholars as well as to my students, because I teach in academic settings, that what you need is good precision and good accuracy. Because unless and until you are focusing on this, you cannot establish scientific base. And there are two disciplines which focus a lot on good precision and good accuracy. One is medicine, another is judiciary. Because if we commit mistakes in these two disciplines, we are dealing with deaths and lives of people. So if in market research, accuracy goes little hayway, it's okay. In share market, if it goes little hayway, it's okay. They can go for 10% error, 15% error, they are fine with it. What new product a company has to launch in the market, they can go with little less precision and less accuracy. But in medical science and in judiciary, if it is not 99% precision and accuracy, or in a lenient way, 95% precision and accuracy, it is not accepted. So I know research work in field of medicine because I guide many students, and I have studied a lot of research work in especially the field of medicine, not just with homeopathy, but with other disciplines of medical science as well. And I've seen that they go for 99% accuracy, only 1% error. And the last one is poor precision and poor accuracy, which we don't want, right? Now, let me give you an example how we apply biostatistics in diagnosis and how we can apply biostatistics in prescribing, homeopathic prescribing. Let's consider the case of pneumonia. This is how a lot of researchers say in their books, right? If there is a fever, 5% chance of pneumonia, cough, 10% chance, rapid breathing, 30% chance, dyspnea, 50% chance, auscultatory findings, 70% chance, CRP positive, 80% chance. So with every diagnostic criteria, you are increasing percentage of diagnosis or percentage of occurrence of pneumonia. This is how we diagnose, right? And for every disorders, there are biostatistical indicators. That is the reason in our medicine books, we have those columns: etiology, symptoms, signs, auscultatory findings, because those have come on the basis of biostatistics while studying those disorders. Now, how can you apply the same diagnostic criteria to prescribing? This is something very interesting. So if there is a cough, suppose I have to prescribe Brineia for pneumonia, how can I be sure of? 5% chance that I'll prescribe Brineia. If it is getting worse entering warm room, 20% chance. If I hold chest while coughing, 40% chance. If I have thirst for large quantities, 50% chance. If I have desire for cold drink, 60% chance. And if along with other symptoms, I have changed from cold to warm weather, I'll be 70% sure that Brineia is indicated for this case of pneumonia. This is what we have to do in homeopathic prescribing by attaching biostatistics with our prescription through the knowledge of research methodology. And believe me, a lot of homeopaths are doing this. This is called as Boolean, a very common data science statistical tool. And this is what how biostatistics is applied to the field of homeopathic prescribing. You all can learn it. It is no rocket science, right? Another example of Merck salt. Suppose I have to prescribe if there is a sore throat, 10%, bad odor, 25%, salivation at night, 40%, having recurrent apathy, 55%. If I grind my teeth during sleep, then 70%. So every symptom adding on, my biostatistics percentage is going up of prescribing Merck salt. This is what I call integrating biostatistics with research in your clinical practice. Now, all the pioneers, see, we follow Hahnemann, we follow Bonninghausen, we follow Kent, and we all have read the original books, whether it is Materia Medica Pura or Organon of Medicine. So did our masters follow research methodology and biostatistics while they were discovering this new science of homeopathy at that point of time and when they were writing their books? So let me tell you, biostatistics and research methodology are very much there in all the 4 subjects of homeopathy, whether it is materia, repertory, pharmacy, or organon. And let me give you some examples. This is what Hahnemann writes in his repertory. And you can see, for the convenience of treatment, we require merely to jot down after every symptom all the medicines which can produce such a symptom with tolerable accuracy. Now focus on the word accuracy. And I also talk about accuracy and precision in biostatistics. So maybe research methodology and biostatistics were not established disciplines at that point of time, but our master Hahnemann did know about it. Expressing them by a few letters, this is what we do when we convert our tools into numbers. We give them some numbers, and Hahnemann have called them letters. And also to bear in mind the circumstances under which they occur. So if you study research, you will study that in every research, we talk about the context of research, where that research is taking place. What is the context behind it? That's what Hahnemann talks about, the circumstances. This is what I found in Bonninghausen's writing. And Bonninghausen's writings, and rather all our repertories, are nothing but tools. So we know that in our repertories, we have symptoms 1+, 2+, 3+, 4+, 5+. Some of the repertories having different rubric system. But what is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Converting intensity into numbers. This is what we do today when we select proper tools in order to compare pre-post, in order to have pre-post interventional comparison. We select a tool, we tell our patient to rank them in the order of 1 to 5, or tell his or her intensity and frequency of symptom on a grading of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. And that's what the repertory work is all about. So whether they knew about this field or not, or these fields were established at that point of time or not, but definitely they followed accuracy, precision, numbers, everything in their writings. And today we have to carry this work forward by integrating contemporary knowledge of research methodology and biostatistics to our classical homeopathic literature and to our new inquiries as well. Let me talk about another very famous aphorism of which can be corresponded to biostatistics. We know that aphorism 153 talks about more peculiar symptoms have greater value regarding the choice of a homeopathic medicine or in differentiating between homeopathic medicines. We all know aphorism 153. So if you go to the literature of PSM today, or if you talk to any epidemiologist today, they will say it is high likelihood ratio. This is a very famous statistical measure, high likelihood ratio. They call it LR. And Hahnemann has already written about LR in aphorism 153. Low prevalence, but high specificity. This is what exactly high likelihood ratio talks about, right? So whosoever will do a genuine practice, a genuine study, a genuine research, automatically research methodology and biostatistics will come in their work. And it's good that we study this RM and biostatistics formally so that we can actually convert our clinical practice, our studies, and our research into this language and publish it more. this was all about what I had to speak to, and I'm speaking at various platforms and propagating that we all should go for this research and biostatistics based, evidence-based knowledge in homeopathic clinical findings in our research work as well as in our education. Thank you. I will be taking your questions at the end. You can jot down your questions. I would be happy to take it. Now I request Dr. Pankaj to take on. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Kavita, the CA group, and the administrator of the program, Dr. Shweta, and Dr. Shrija, and everyone. I appreciate the just now talk with my co-speaker, Dr. Vandana. And next, please. Next slide, please. So what we have been discussing so far, just I think some, just see the previous slide. I think many slides were skipped. Just see. Okay, so let us start with here. What is the idea? Means just now we spoke about the research methodology and the ideas of the research and everything. Where is the difficulty? Where is the problem? The difficulty and the problem amongst homeopathic students like me or many more, those who are trained in a certain way, they are not very much gelling with the idea of research. And especially when the person like Dr. Vanna, when they speak with so many different ideas and thoughts and principles of research, we feel what is the need. But as Dr. Vanna just now told, that how you see the Hahnemann himself, he worked so much. And if you go into the deep study of Hahnemann and his Ognon, you will come to know that to my best of the knowledge, that Hahnemann is the first one in the field of medical science to give the medical research methodology. And not that only he has given the methodology, rather he not just simply came out with the idea, rather he formed it as a concept, and he did a real research in the whole thing and brought the result before us and wrote in such a manner that we can also go ahead with those things. So the thing is how this idea has come, how this thought has come, and how it has become the concept. That is what is something very important to understand. I think most of you are homeopathic doctors, and especially those who are graduated from India, they all have gone through the life history of Hahnemann. And the whole crux is that he wanted that the suffering humanity should become healthy. That was the whole idea he was after. And he was seeing very clearly and judiciously that whatever may be the prevalent modes of treatment in the time of Hahnemann, they were not really coming out with the result of the health. Lot many ideas are there. And in the whole literature review, we can say the introduction part of Ognon by Hahnemann, he just brought all the details of all the ideas and prevalent methods of the health and treatment in his time. And he told the goods and bads of all those methods of treatment. And in my YouTube channel, Dr. Pankaj Agarwal, I explained all those things in a detail. You can just see, and that will be very, very helpful if anybody wants to know. So he made to understand how to go into the research, and that too in a systematic research. Next slide, please. So any such idea which is related to homeopathy, related to homeopathic materia medica, related to organon of medicine, repertory, whatever now you discuss, a few of the points were discussed by previous speaker, Dr. Vanna, but in present time, all these subjects, homeopathic materia medica, organon of medicine, repertory, these all subjects, they have become debatable. And especially the way of prescribing is the most debated topic. As just now the chief administrator, Dr. Shweta, told that they now in this KHA group, you have so many presentations, 180, I think she quoted. We can just come to know various ways of prescribing. I'm not saying it is wrong or right. I'm saying the way of prescribing has become a debate. It shouldn't be. There can be ways of prescribing, no doubt about it. Even in the organon of medicine, Hahnemann has told some 33 ways of prescribing in the different situations and conditions and the kind of disease or kind of circumstances. He has described all those methods of prescribing. But the debate is that most of the people are using in homeopathy the different ways of prescribing right from Hahnemann's infancy to his most wisdom practice of homeopathy. But the difficulty is we cling to one. And when we cling to one and we just say, do this is the only gospel and rest is all useless. That is what making the whole issue debatable. And then when it is going to the scientific arena, when it is going to the scientific world, they even question Hahnemann, they even question all of us. So this is what everything is going around. So various ways of prescribing in that, there are many ways which Hahnemann has told, I told you. Then post-Hahnemannian stalwarts, like the most important name comes, that is the Dr. Kent, Dr. J.T. Kent. And his method is very popularly known as Kentinian methods of prescribing, which finally led to the division of school. Why we say that it has caused a division of the school? And not that division of the school, the way before Kent things were moving, according to the given methods of Hahnemann, things were moving in such a way that it was going on the ladder of the research methodology. But Kent and thereafter, it has completely changed. And we actually, if I'm not boosting things, it has messed up so many things. Why? What happened actually? Why it has been divided? The reason is the era when Kent came, the whole of the America was following one philosopher, Swedenborg. And you see the whole concept and the methodology of homeopathy. I'm saying methodology. Whatever is given in the organon of medicine is a methodology of homeopathy. So whole of this methodology was passed through the Swedenborgian philosophy. And now a new way of homeopathy is being discussed and practiced and explained. And because that people were after the Swedenborg and his philosophy, somehow Hahnemann got the backseat. And thereafter things derailed and a kind of inertia developed in the whole battery of homeopathic doctors, that nobody is going back to Hahnemann and doing the practice in the way as just now Dr. Vanda said, as Hahnemann did. He was practicing as well as researching till his last breath. Next slide, please. the whole important thing is the keeping this whole idea in view. What are the Hahnemannian methods? Let us take out one out of it. What I'm just going to impress before you is the one of the most important method of Hahnemannian prescribing, which has been now available to be seen in the Bengal School of Prescribing, Kolkata School of Prescribing. Those who have studied from Kolkata and the West Bengal in India, they only give importance to this, and rest are not giving the importance. I'm going to take up the example of this prescribing instead of going into the too much of historical detail. I think most of you know all those historical details. I just gave you a glimpse of this historical detail. So let us just go ahead with the idea that in the prescribing, keeping in view the physical constitution of the patient. This is one very, very important, vital, but highly neglected way of prescribing, especially nowadays, because we all are more keen to understand mental symptoms. I'm not saying that's wrong. Yes, that is also needed. But then why we are ignoring this? Let us catch hold of it. And when we are going to catch a hold of these kind of methodology in prescribing, as given in aphorism 5, so what is going to be possible that we can also come out with a proper research paper. See, just now when Dr. Vanda was telling about the research designs, basically we are able to see two kinds of research design. One is the experimental and the other is the observational. So the thing is, whatever Hahnemann has gave us, he gave us his observational research before us, and we were just going ahead with that, and in that with Swedenborg we got messed up. But in the meanwhile, the other school, they have worked hard and went up to the experimental and much more, and we are just still fighting that which observation is good or which one is bad. So that should not be. If you go into the Hahnemann's life, his most unfulfilled desire was to have a homeopathic hospital, which he was not able to fulfill. Now suppose, let us imagine, Hahnemann had that hospital with him. We can easily make out he must have done the experimental studies as per the design, and things would have been all different. So here, going with this methodology of physical constitution, things are going to be easy. It is very easy to understand. I'll just come up with the details. Now, which book to be followed? That is just fix the idea. That is, we can say, the Allen's keynote. Why? Because if you go into the Allen's keynotes, it has got some 188 medicines recorded. Out of this 188 medicines, in 110 medicines, Hahnemann, Dr. Callan has explained the physical constitution of each medicine. Just imagine, out of 188, he is telling the physical constitution in 110 very clearly. I'll give you a few examples later. Then let us just fix up one disorder. Let us just take diabetes mellitus type 2. Now, what should be the purpose? That how this methodology of prescribing, seeing the physical constitution, how it is going to be sure shot and effective prescribing methodology. Now, just a glimpse, what is this physical constitution? If you just see aphorism 5 in the Organon of Medicine, you will find 7 different circumstances and situations and the presentations of the patient where we can find out the details of the disease. And in that, the first one, Hahnemann writes the physical constitution. In that bracket, he says that especially in chronic diseases. That is why I chose diabetes mellitus type 2. For the information, the recent researches are telling when a patient comes to a doctor, to a homeopathic doctor, that I'm suffering with diabetes and what is the treatment. Now, when you're going into the treatment of this, search the details at least 10 years before, because it almost takes 10 years for a person to be diabetic. So this is something very, very important to understand, that 10 years down the line, life of a person. So in that, you will be able to see how his physical constitutions is, changing. So the whole understanding is the physical constitution means the person, how does he appear? How does he look? In the height, in the complexion, in the all those presentations. You're not asking anything, you're seeing and finding out that he's a stout person, he's a thin person, he's a dark person, he's a blonde person, like this. Next slide, please. Now, just give you an example. If you just go into the Kalikab, you will find these kind of words, and other means tendency to obesity. And in the conium, if you go, you will find, what are these examples? These are the examples about the symptoms of these remedies, which are telling about the person is almost towards diabetes type 2. In the diabetes mellitus type 2, these are the very classical features when patient comes to us. Patient doesn't know. He just come, Doctor Sahab, I am suffering with constipation. Just give me a medicine so that I should be able to clear my bowels very pleasantly. Now, to be a doctor, we must understand we are not to treat the constipation. Constipation is the hallmark symptom of diabetes. Similarly, no inclination to work, vertigo, excessive sweat. Again, calcarea carb, if you see constipation, no desire for physical activities, argentum nitricum, excessive urination, acetic acid, intense thirst. These are the examples we can find in these remedies, which are indicating towards a kind of diabetic situation may be possible there. Next, please. In these medicines, again, if you go into their physical constitution, how they look like. If suppose a patient coming before you explaining constipation, and if you see and find the person is going towards diabetes and you are able to diagnose with the biochemical testing and everything, he may be young, but he has a disease of old people and having dark hair, legs loose fibers, means his muscles are not well maintained, means out of the complete exercise, he is not at all into the exercise. So legs fibers and inclined to the obesity. We understand this is another feature of diabetes, and he looks anemic. Just seeing this, you may go into the whole detail of the case, but seeing this can be Kalikab, as just now told, likelihood ratio. In the likelihood ratio of homeopathic prescribing, following the aphorism 153, the most important thing which is going to help us to select a right medicine, the right simillimum, is this physical constitution. And just imagine, if I just want to know somebody that he's a very anxiety anticipating person, he's a very quarrelsome person, he's a very jealous person, he's a very suspicious person, I may have to put some 10-20 questions. Still, I'm not sure. But this physical constitution, I need not to ask any question. It is visibly there. And a smart person can answer my question in such a way that he may put me somewhere here and there and misplace me, and I can read him wrong. But a person who is looking like this cannot in any way hide his hair, cannot hide his legs fiber, he cannot hide his obesity, he cannot hide his anemic conditions. Similarly, in the conium, all these things I have just mentioned here. Even in Calcareaca, leucophlegmatic, blonde hair, light complexion, blue eyes. Can anybody change eyes? If he is really wearing some contact lenses, you can make out. You can ask, are you with contact lenses? And please remove, I just want to see the color of the iris. So, like this in the Argentum nitricum, seeing the young person withered, dried up, old looking. He's not the old person by age, but he looks like old patient. Can anybody hide this? Like this, seeing the physical constitution and seeing the conditions of the very early stage of the diabetes, one can understand how to prescribe on the basis of physical constitution. Next, please. What are the factors? Just see, these are the 11 points: age, gender, complexion, features, hair, eyes, musculature, skin, looks, habits, builds. All these are the 11 points, maybe more, but then these are the most important 11 points to understand, judge, and know, and write down on the case sheet the physical constitution of the patient at the time when patient is visiting. Now, some example by so many of these stalwarts, like what Dr. Stuart Close defines as that aggregate of hereditary characters influenced more or less by the environment with which determine the individual reaction, successful or unsuccessful, to the stress of the environment. What Dr. J.T. Kent says about the physical constitution, it is the external disorder following disorder in the man, the vital force. This is how the vital force, the living energy, able to express the disorder just the outside to understand and for a physician who is really the servant to the vital force, who just want to understand the deviation of the vital force and to select a help in the name of simillimum medicine to really correct this situation of the vital force to make him healthy. Like this, so many of the physicians, they have defined and explained and gave the importance to the physical constitution. Next, please. Now, with all these things, we really need to study homeopathic literature. What is happening nowadays into the understanding of the homeopathic literature? That all this homeopathic literature, if you go into, we have just kept aside the original literature. What we are studying the books and the literature which are kind of secondary literature, tertiary literature. Just give you one example. Let's say we study homeopathic materia medica. Now, let us all ask ourselves, which book of materia medica? I will say, I study Kent's materia medica. Now, let us see the book written by Dr. J.T. Kent on homeopathic materia medica. That the title of the book is Lectures on Homeopathic Materia Medica. Just see, just imagine. He says lectures on homeopathic materia medica, and we call it as homeopathic materia medica. The homeopathic materia medicas are the Mathematica Pura, chronic diseases, and T.F. Allen's book of Mathematica. Means I'm just going to say the provings. When we say I'm studying Organon, we mean some treatise, some help book, some explanation of the things on Organon of medicine. But then if we ask which author you're reading, they never tell we are reading the textbook of of Organon of medicine, which has been written by Hahnemann, translated by such and such person. We're not going into those things. So many things are required to go into the homeopathic literature. Just very current, I was discussing with one doctor regarding the miasms, like prescribing. In the prescribing, concept of miasm is one of the most controversial, debatable topic. Some do not really regard miasm. Why? Because our Dr. Herring, Constantine Herring, he said, if your selection is correct, we just give no importance to the miasm. But then such kind of loose talk, maybe by our stalwarts, maybe by our seniors, we shouldn't. Because it has its own importance, merit, usefulness. Otherwise, Hahnemann would have not come out of all these things. So some are explaining the miasm as per the Swedenborgian philosophy, and it is altogether different. But if you go into what Hahnemann is talking about, is altogether different. And when you go into the concept of miasm, what Hahnemann is saying, it is more closer to the modern studies of pathology. I generally say, with my understanding, what Hahnemann has told about the miasm is the clinical microbiology. And what we study nowadays in the modern, the laboratory microbiology, that requires some kind of sync, that requires some kind of synchronization. We need to do that. So what I just want to say, that studying homeopathic literature is very, very important. But then because literature already messed up, start with Hahnemann and just align the rest of the literature. That is going to give you more understanding towards the homeopathy and going towards the research. Otherwise, you cannot do a research. As I told you, the miasm, one group is saying something, one group is saying something else, but then Hahnemann talks very clearly the criteria, the symptoms, the list, the you can say the tool he has created for the miasm. But we are not going into those things. Next, please. So if we just go into the research, what I was talking to you about, this diabetes, about this physical constitution, how should we write? We can just make an attempt. Let us just say what should be the title. We can say like this: scientific basis of treatment of diabetes mellitus type 2 based on physical constitution. And rest is the detail required. Are we going to the open label study? Are we going into the RCT? Are we going, into something else kind of design? Ultimately, we need to add some design to this, but the basic title is related to this. Then what should be the aim? To understand the basis of prescribing by selecting the remedy on the physical constitution only observed while case checking in cases of diabetes mellitus 2 at the early stage when blood sugar level is below 180 but above 140. Now, what is the rationale of selecting this number, one above 140 and below 180? Whenever a person starts with the diabetes, if in a very early stage he is able to trace it, when doctors of the modern medicine are explaining and trying to make him understand that you are in this stage, what we can say as a pre-diabetic stage. So we do not want that to start with the medication, but we would like you to be strict on the diet, do exercise, and all these kind of change of lifestyle they explain. This is the time when we should prescribe him on the basis of physical constitution. What is the number 140 above? When the blood sugar level is above 140, it starts doing the changes at the capillary level in the kidney, in the heart, in the brain, every part. And a harm begins. A very silent harm begins. And then you can say when it is going above 180, it starts spilling out into the urine at the same time. Not only in the blood, but now it is available in the urine. Below 180, it is not available in the urine. So this is what the very base, when nobody is going to question you why you are doing some harm to the patient. Nobody is going to start the other some hypoglycemic medicines, allopathic medicines to that patient. So this is the, we are to take care of so many ethical issues in treatment. What is that? As Henman told, do no harm to the patient. In the aphorism 2, Henman says that your medicine should not harm. Hippocrates said, primum non nocere. That is what the most important ethics we should follow while doing the research. In the name of research, we cannot put any life into the harm. That is something very, very important, apart from so many other things, but that is the most vital one. What should be the criteria of prescribing? As I gave you the 11 points, how patient looks, how is complexion, height, and all those 11 points I just told you in the last slide. Then we have to decide a duration. We can say 3 visits of the patient with a gap of 1 month each. So it is going to be first visit, then after 1 month, second visit after 1 month, third visit. So it is going to be 2 months period. And we are monitoring the patient with his fasting and BP, blood sugar, and we can add some more parameters, HbA1c, and there are many other parameters we can go into. This is the most basic, which you can test in your clinic, patient can test in his at home with this glucometer. So we can just make out what exactly is the thing in this period, because every month you cannot go into the HbA1c. So this is the very elementary study I am just saying before you. We can just do it and find out what is happening with the cases. Next, please. So what should be the procedure? How to proceed with the procedure? Select the patients showing features of the blood sugar, like for example, Acanthus nigricans. Acanthus nigricans, I think everyone is knowing. When patient is saying dark circles here and there, below the eyes, on the knuckles, at various places, especially on the knuckles and on the back of the neck. Most of the patient coming, we have some skin disease. It is not a skin disease. It is a expression of the diabetes on the skin. It is the cry of the vital force telling how your organism is going to be affected seriously. Do something. But we must learn this. So when such things are there, family history of diabetes is there, person is not inclined to do any kind of exercise, go into the full case taking, do special observations regarding the 11 features. Like in my clinic, I just ask the patient if he's wearing glasses, please remove your glass, put your torch, see the color of the iris. Mostly, you can say in the Indian origin people, we just don't find blue eyes. When we read Mitra Medica, we find blue eyes. In India, it is rare. No, I'm finding almost every third day one patient having blue eyes, at least some blue color in their iris. They may not be very typical, completely blue eyes, but they have some features of blueness in their iris. So like this, many different features we are able to find out in the patient, but be watchful towards that, especially when you're going into the research. When slowly we are going into writing and doing the research, we will learn and we will be having a habit of noting the patient in the manner. Then after matching this feature, physical constitution with the medicines, let us prescribe. When we have to prescribe, we must have a proper criteria for potency and dose. It is not, okay, all right, I only have 200, let me give it 200. I have only LM5, so let me give LM5. No, no, not like this. Hahnemann was the one in the medicine who actually very, very meticulous and particular about the potency and about the whole mathematics of it. And you go into the Ognon in the footnotes, he has explained the whole mathematics of all these potencies and 30 and 200 and how it is made and everything. You know, it is a complete mathematical thing we find in the pharmacy classes and we follow. Then we have to decide some inclusion exclusion criteria. Like as I told you, the cases which is having the biochemical level of sugar above 140 and below 180, they will be included. Then who should be excluded? That also we should decide. Idea, a pregnant female, we may harm 2 lives. In the name of research, we cannot, so exclude. Children, they are not going to be type 2, they are going to be type 1. You understand, type 1 is insulin deficiency, so exclude. Then patients with already having comorbidities like heart issues, brain issues and such kind of things, they should not be the part, and many other complications, maybe CRF. So we just want to be very meticulous what we are doing by saying very clearly what is to be included and what is to be excluded. And we have to be deciding the age group of the patient we are going into.
Dr.
Mostly,
Pankaj,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. It is very, very interesting. And we have 10 to 15 minutes left, Dr. Pankaj. So just wanted to let you know. Please continue. Thank you.
All right. It is just 5 minutes more. Yeah, I'm going ahead. Please, next slide, please. So ultimately, what is the whole idea? That we should be able to have a proper design with the topic, with the questions in the hand, what we are going to do, with the proper method of the operations, what we are going to do, and the proper understanding how we are going to collect the data, analyze the results, and interpret and ultimately conclude this. For every case we are going into the clinic, we have to do some kind of this designing, which is going to be teachable to me, teachable to the student coming to me in the clinic, and we can just publish it in some of the reputed journal or wherever it is acceptable, which is going to be the part of the scientific arena. Next, please. Then what I just spoke to you about, I tell you, when in some 2016-17, when I was doing my PhD and I found out that I do not know research. And that was a time I reconnected with Dr. Vanna, the previous speaker, and she made my PhD very, very easy, and I can understand the day when I went to her and I told, I want to do this. I was with one idea. And he heard my idea and took a paper without speaking even a one word. She just draw some kind of model on the paper. And he said, see, your research is ready. So he converted the whole of the idea I was telling to her in a concept. After that, I decided, after completing, that Dr. Vanna, my field, myself, and many of the professionals of homeopathy, they really want to understand this. that they know, but then they do not know that they actually know. So we started with the one idea, with the thought, with one organization to be named as AHER. In that, we just collected Dr. Vanda and such people, those who are very dedicated homeopathic persons, those who really want to inculcate the discipline of homeopathy in India towards the research. Next, please. So the objective is to develop, uphold the highest level of excellence in homeopathic education as well as practice, while enhancing the role of homeopathic professional as an integral part of healthcare delivery system in India. We just want that people, what they are doing in the clinic should come up with their understanding before the scientific arena. Next, please. And we are running two kind of courses, long term, short term. In this long term 3 months weekend courses, we are giving certain kind of understanding how to go into the research, and we are doing some short term customized day long workshop that how to write a synopsis like this. Next, please. So these are the courses, and for whom it is actually with the Indian settings, that in the CCRH, that is a research organization of Government of India, they appoint many of the research officers and assistants and the research fellows, and the MD entrance, UPSC exam, and all those. We are just giving such kind of understanding of the thing, how to go about in the name of 3 months weekend courses. And we are just doing certain skill-based, customized day-long workshops, how to write synopsis, literature review, thesis writing, and all such kind of things. And we are doing planning to have some kind of just 1 day long courses on acute disease handling, ENT disease handling. Next, please. Even software we are going to learn from Dr. Vanda, that how to do it. So this is all about what we are doing, and me and Dr. Vanda are just finishing whatever we wanted to talk to, and our topic, and end up here. And we are open, happy to answer your queries. Most welcome your questions, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vandana and Dr. Pankaj. This is really a great presentation, and we will bring you back again. And Dr. Sweta, would you like to take any questions from the audience?
Some questions in the chat box. Now there is no questions now.
I think everyone is enjoying, and it's a really very enlightening session, especially with the research methodology and integrating the tools for the scientific evidence-based study and data analysis. So much we have gained in today's webinar, the biostatics. And I would say this is very helpful and the need of the hour at this time. And thank you so much, Dr. Vandana and Dr. Pankaj. And we would like to take privilege to honor your gracious presence and for your precious time in sharing your knowledge and wisdom at our study group with our CAST certificate, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all the participants for being so patient and listening to us. Thank you so much for this honor to entire KHA group.
Dr. Sweta, would you like to speak, please?
Yes, ma'am. For me, this is a wonderful webinar, and the topic is need of the hour. And for Dr. Pankaj, he is our guru. He is the master of Organon, and I thoroughly enjoyed his webinar. And I want to thank you, sir, for all your precious teachings when I was in graduation and through all the webinars I have attended. And for Dr. Panna, we have very few person in this field who have this kind of vast knowledge about this topic, and you are one of them. And looking forward for some more webinars with you. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone, if you want to talk to speakers, please let us know. We can unmute. And if you have any questions, do let us know in the chat. I know it is 10:30 p.m. in India. It is late night and they have to go back to work tomorrow. And from different parts, people have joined. So we appreciate their time too. So if you have any questions, you can email us also.
Just to see, Dr. Kavita, just see on your Facebook Live if anybody is putting any question there, if you can just see that.
We have
Yes.
one question from Dr. Seema Sultana. Is there chance to recur? What can we do for diabetes not to recur if it get cured?
Yeah, means when I say go into this kind of research and this kind of practice for diabetes, when you're going to treat it with the lifestyle correction and the homeopathic way of prescribing, definitely the first and most important thing is that it should not recur. But the whole thing is you should not change your lifestyle. See, I've been studying recently. Your brain is in your stomach, your gut, and your gut is in your brain. What I just want to say is that in the gut, there are some 100 trillion microorganisms. We call them bacteria. They are living. 100 trillion of the bacteria, apart from many fungus, many viruses and all. And these are the whole community of the bacteria. They live with us, they sleep with us. As we are talking to each other virtually, they are also in communication with all of us. And the whole world in this gut of the bacteria and all, they just do a lot of good for us. But when we change our lifestyle, it is going to harm us. We need to correct all those things, our lifestyle. And you all understand in Organon and in practice has been told that we have to correct those things, plus the homeopathic prescribing. What exactly homeopathic prescribing? To cut out the myism. Once you are able to cut that out, the disease will not come back for sure. It will not come back. Any more
Thank you, sir.
questions?
And there's one question on our Facebook page. Can you give some examples of 33 way of prescribing?
Very good.
As you
So
given
I tell you, let us just discuss a few. Means if I'm going to say all 33, then all webinars will be completed. Just, you know, how to prescribe in one-sided diseases. It is one way of prescribing. And in that there are subtypes. Like in one-sided diseases, Hahnemann says, whatever may be one or two most prominent symptoms, prescribing on that. And in one-sided diseases, sometimes what happens when most prominent symptoms are not there, less prominent symptoms are there, that too just one or two, there you prescribe partially similar medicines. And with the partial similar medicines, you are going in a zigzag manner and correcting the disease. Then when you talk about the diseases like intermittent diseases are not only fevers. There are other intermittent diseases also apart from fever. In that, you have a different ways of prescribing. Like intermittent fever, the most important symptom, which is an apyrexia state. There are 4 stages: chill, heat, sweat, apyrexia. The symptom in the apyrexia is the most important symptom to be prescribed on. And like this, if you go into the other strategies like mental diseases, how will you prescribing in mental diseases? So there are some 33 ways of prescribing. I give you a few of the examples, and I hope it will incite you to go into the organon and find out rest. Thank you so much.
So over to you, Dr. Kavita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweta. And really, it is very great topic, Dr. Pankaj and Dr. Vandana. And all the work you both are doing in regards to the research is really appreciated, and everyone will take it as an inspiration and step into this research process. And AHER is also very interesting. And thank you once again. And we would like to announce the upcoming event on October 17th, 2021. We have Dr. George from Eastern Europe on the topic visual homeopathy, the value of visual signs in prescribing successful remedies. And we have many more renowned homeopaths lined up for our CA webinars. And we again invite Dr. Vandana and Dr. Pankaj to our webinar soon. And I thank CA Homeopathy Study Group entire team for the continuous selfless support and for all the activities. And today we have our CA volunteers, Dr. Shrija, Dr. Nupursha, Dr. Lakshita, Dr. Mamata, Dr. Sweta Verma, and also Dr. Deepa, Dr. Bhavana, and many more CA volunteers have participated in this one and watching from Facebook Live. And thank you so much to all the participants from different parts of the world and for your precious and undivided attention. And we always thank Universe again and all the dignitaries of CA speakers at our webinars. And anything, Dr. Vandana and Dr. Pankaj, would you like to say before we end this session?
Vanna, please.
Sure. It's an honor for me to be here, to be a part of this study group. I and Dr. Pankaj are joining CA group for the very first time, and the experience has been very pleasing for us also. We look forward for future opportunities, and our motto of establishing AHER into the field of homeopathy is, of course, propagating more research knowledge with the field of homeopathy that we aim to, and we will be very, very happy to share in the future CA webinars as well. Very warm and pleasing thank you to all the CA group and especially to Dr. Kavita.
My honor to my respect and regard to Dr. Kavita, to KHA, and to all the participants who are still sitting and listening, all of us, me and Vanna. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, KHA group.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj and Dr. Vandana. And we will wrap this session. And Dr. Sweta, would you like to end this session, please?
To all the viewers for joining us today. We have many such informative webinars lined up in future, and in case you missed any of the webinar, you can watch them at our YouTube channel with the name Kavita Kukunur. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram with the name CA Study Group. And if you have any query, you can reach us at castudygroup@gmail.com. I have posted one jot form in the chat box. You can fill it up in the next 2 days and send it to us for receiving your certificate of participation. Thank you all. Shall I wrap, ma'am?
Yes, Dr. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.